First things first, this video would have came way earlier, but Hoyoverse decided to put me on an early Easter break by hitting me with 5 different strikes at the same time, but of course there's nothing in this world that can truly stop me other than a rerun patch. Anyways, Boothill is one of the more complex characters to fully build in this game, with him both scaling off break effect and regular DPS stats. Boothill functions closer to a premium breaker rather than a standard DPS since he scales much better with break effect than crit. Because of this, building him ends up being slightly different than you'd probably expect, so in this video I'll be going over his best Lightcones, Relics and Stats optimizations for everyone's favorite stereotype. But before we get started with that, this video is sponsored by Lootbar. There are a ton of leaked characters in Honkai Star Rail and Genshin, and if you're like me, you have no pulls. As topping up on Genshin in Star Rail is so much more expensive than it should be, the prices are insane, the transactions are slow, and it's pretty much the fastest way to go broke and still probably lose the 50-50. Luckily, there is a way to get Genesis crystals and Oniric shards for way cheaper. Lootbar is probably the best and most cost-effective way to get affordable top-ups for Genshin in Star Rail. Lootbar ensures secure, lightning-fast transactions that make using it easy. If you're looking to save huge amounts of money whilst still having secure transactions, ease of use and speed, I don't think there's a better option out there. I used it to help secure my Acheron pulls and they came pretty much immediately. Topping up Genshin Impact and Star Rail on Lootbar's website is also done through miHoYo's official route, creating a worry-free experience and a completely safe one too. It's just as simple as going on the website, looking through the discounted options, of up to 25% by the way. Choosing one, filling out minor details like your UID and server, and selecting one of the wide range of payment options. Lootbar ensures that all orders will be delivered in 30 minutes or less, but don't be surprised if your order come early like mine did. So if you're looking for the best way to top up in Genshin and Star Rail, I don't particularly see a better way to do it. New users can get 5% off, so they are basically just throwing free Jades and Primo Gems at you. But yeah, you get the point. As I mentioned before, Boothill scales way better with break effect than any other stat. Mostly because nearly all of his damage comes from physical break combined with his enhanced basic attack, which deals massive instances of break damage that only scales with his break effect stat, debuffs on the enemy and things such as resistance penetration and defense shred. As a result of this, you really want to focus on maximizing the amount of break damage he can do, as the percentage of his overall damage that scales purely on crit stats doesn't even make up 25% of his overall damage, meaning that anything that tends to not buff his break damage ends up scaling a lot worse on him. This may sound like a negative on paper, but it means his damage ceiling is extremely high as break damage tends to have a really high damage floor. You can basically not give Boothill a Lightcone and it won't really affect his damage profile that much, as the base stats on a Lightcone don't really affect his damage at all. Meaning that only the secondary effect and passives can end up significantly boosting his damage. Due to this, I've literally seen a Fuzon Lightcone Boothill 0 cycle memory of chaos before. Speaking about Lightcones, Boothill's signature basically avoids all the problems of him not benefiting much from regular stats by providing him pretty much every stat he wants. Since break damage benefits a lot from defense shred and ignore due to it being one of the things that can actually increase its damage, Boothill's signature provides 20 defense ignore on break damage. Since he does not really care too much about crit stats, his Lightcone provides 60 break effect instead. And finally, the bonus speed helps him reach the speed goal for his best in-slot planar set, which I'll talk a bit more about later. Boothill's Lightcone is extremely good as expected, being around 10% better than the next option at the bare minimum. Keep in mind that this can go up quite significantly depending on the amount of bleeds that you get on the enemy. For my own calculations, I didn't really bother since I don't believe that enemies after you break them will live long enough to actually see the bleed damage, as Boothill kind of one-shots as soon as you break the enemy, and his signature really does help boost his damage quite significantly. I would consider picking this up if you care about making your Boothill as strong as possible, but since his damage floor is so high, His signature probably won't feel needed since he does so much raw damage by himself, but it's still probably one of the best signatures at the moment, and it will definitely remain that way till we get a Hunt Lightcone tailored to break. Boothill's next best option is pretty much all of them, as since none of them really offer anything to help boost his break damage, you can kind of just pick any Hunt Lightcone you have. All of them are fairly similar in damage, with cruising and swordplay being my personal recommendations due to their accessibility and ease of use, but like I said, I don't think it matters all that much and you can kind of do whatever you want here. For those who finally thought that this Lightcone was going to finally have a use case, I'm very sorry to tell you that it's just as mid as all of his other non-signature options. I just put it on the thumbnail because I love Gwynathan. Boothill's relic options are quite similar to Jingliu's or Dan Heng's, lacking a signature set at the moment, leaving them with little to no strong options. There are only really two ways to boost his break damage: running a combination of break 2 pieces or the quantum set. Genius is a pretty good generalist option, which is made especially good once you pair it with his signature Lightcone or a defense shredder such as Pella or Silverwolf to make the defense shred it provides even more valuable. On the other hand, 2-piece break combinations are what I assume most people will be going for, and they work pretty great as a stat stick, being especially nice without Boothill's signature, as stacking break effect is quite hard without it, and running a combination of break pieces allows you to do it much more efficiently. More standard DPS sets tend to fall behind quite a bit when it comes to Boothill's damage, but if they have good substats, they are still fairly good and usable. His planar options are even more simple. You basically always want Talia in every single situation, with these options being usable on him if they have good sub-stats. For main stats, you generally want a crit rate chest as he gets so much crit damage for free in his kit. Speed boots generally are preferred, but if you can hit 145 speed for Talia on attack boots, you can use those instead. A physical damage orb is ideal, but attack doesn't fall behind by much, and finally you always want a break effect rope. Aiming for as much break effect on your substats is always best, as his trace sets a pretty solid goal of reaching 300 break effect, but more is always better, as break effect is still his most important substat even past 300. Like I mentioned before, you can kind of ignore crit damage substats and focus on crit rate, and speed up to about 160 is good for him. I'll be discussing his teammate options and Eidolons more in depth next week, as Boothill is still due some changes next week, but here's a little early spoiler for that. Thank you for watching this smaller guide, and I'm happy to be back to YouTube, but yeah, I'll see you in the next video.